Hi guys, how are you today? In the quiet corners of the Tudor court, beyond the golden tapestries and grand feasts, there existed a small world, almost hidden from view. It was a world where the humble task of dressing a queen took shape. The wardrobe, as it was called, was far more than a mere collection of clothes. It was the place where each garment, each piece of fabric, told a story. Yet these stories went unnoticed by the masses, for they were woven into the quiet routines of the court. The role of the wardrobe was to ensure Queen Elizabeth I was always prepared for her royal duties, her public appearances. Yet the nature of the job was one of silence, precision, and endless repetition. Each day began with the gentle rustle of fabric, the soft murmur of servants gathering the right attire, and the careful consideration of what might best suit a monarch on that particular day. If you're as excited as we are to dive into this captivating journey, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more adventures into the past. Let's uncover the mysteries of the Queen Elizabethan era together. Hit that bell icon too, so you're always first in line for the next historical adventure. Elizabeth's attire was no light matter. Her clothing, though beautiful and intricate, was heavy, both in weight and in significance. Every outfit was chosen with great care, for the Queen's appearance was tied to the very essence of her reign. It spoke of her power, her wealth, and her unyielding authority. But behind each layer of velvet or satin, there were unseen struggles. The workers in the wardrobe spent hours adjusting, tailoring, and stitching. They labored quietly, making sure every fold, every seam was perfect. The weight of this responsibility, often overlooked, was borne by hands that rarely saw the light of day. The work itself was never-ending. Every day, the wardrobe staff had to prepare Elizabeth's garments, and just as quickly, they would be altered or replaced. A single mistake, a slight wrinkle, could disrupt the delicate image that was so carefully crafted. And yet, no one would ever notice their tireless effort. Their names were lost to history, their faces not captured in portraits. The wardrobe existed only in the shadows, maintaining the illusion of perfection for the Queen, while their own stories remained unwritten. As we think back to these workers, we remember their quiet dedication. Their lives were marked not by moments of grandeur, but by the rhythm of routine, the endless crafting of a royal image. Perhaps in the silence of their labour there was a certain calmness, a peace that came with knowing their work, though invisible, was essential. And in that quiet, they too left their mark on history, not with words or fame, but with the quiet and enduring legacy of their craftsmanship. In the soft, unhurried rhythm of the Tudor court, the wardrobe played a quiet yet essential role. It was not a place of grandeur or spectacle, but rather one of intricate detail and precision. The wardrobe was not simply a space filled with garments, but a small, almost hidden world where the Queen's attire was carefully selected, assembled, and prepared for each day. In this small world, every fabric had a purpose. Velvet, silk, satin, and brocade were all chosen with care, each material possessing its own significance. The wardrobe was tasked with ensuring that Queen Elizabeth I's appearance was immaculate at all times. Her clothing was more than just a display of fashion. It was an outward reflection of her power, her sovereignty, and her reign. The wardrobe's role, though often overlooked, was to uphold this visual representation of the Queen's authority. Each garment was chosen not only for its beauty, but also for its symbolism. The Queen's wardrobe had to communicate strength and grace, command respect and admiration, while remaining appropriate for the various ceremonies and events she would attend. For this, the wardrobe workers had to carefully balance practicality with the symbolic weight of the Queen's appearance. The work within the wardrobe was a daily, meticulous routine. Each morning, the workers would begin by laying out the Queen's clothing, carefully choosing which dress or gown would be worn for the day. The decision was never made lightly, for the Queen's clothing needed to reflect not just her personal style, but also her royal stature. Every detail mattered: the colour, the fabric, the fit, all must align perfectly. As the workers carefully draped and arranged, they were acutely aware of their task's importance. Yet much of their labor was done in silence, behind closed doors, away from the public eye. They were not seen, they were not celebrated. And yet their work ensured that the Queen would present herself to her court and the world in a way that was flawless, as though her appearance had occurred naturally, effortlessly. The process was not one of hasty decisions or sudden actions. It was deliberate, slow, and meticulous. The Queen's clothing was not simply assembled in haste, but rather created with quiet deliberation, each stitch, each adjustment made with an awareness of its significance. The tailors, seamstresses, and wardrobe attendants worked together, their hands moving in careful unison to create the perfect garments for their sovereign. Each outfit had its own intricacies, the way a gown was cut, how a sleeve was fitted, the careful placement of jewels and embroidery. The wardrobe staff were responsible for it all, ensuring that the Queen was dressed with the same care as one might tend to a delicate, precious artifact. And just as a piece of art requires the artist's undivided attention, so too did the Queen's attire. While the Queen's clothing was always a source of awe, the workers who made it all possible remained largely invisible. The wardrobe's labourers did not receive the recognition their efforts deserved. Their names were rarely spoken, their faces never immortalized in portraits. They were shadows in the background, their work crucial but unseen. Yet, despite this, the workers in the wardrobe performed their tasks with quiet dedication. They understood that their role, while often unnoticed, was central to the Queen's image. Their hands shaped her visual identity, but it was the Queen herself who received all the credit. In the vast expanse of the royal court, the wardrobe workers lived in a space between shadow and light. They were neither part of the public spectacle nor entirely removed from it. They worked in silence, preparing the Queen's clothing in a world of soft, rustling fabrics and muted voices. Their lives were marked not by public acclaim, but by a quiet, repetitive devotion to their task. The relationship between Queen Elizabeth and her wardrobe was one of quiet trust. The Queen relied on her attendants to dress her, to ensure she was properly adorned for the day's events. Yet this trust did not mean a lack of scrutiny. Elizabeth, known for her sharp eye for detail, often had specific preferences and would require her clothing to be adjusted or altered in the slightest way to meet her expectations. In the soft moments before her appearances, as the wardrobe staff carefully dressed her, Elizabeth would inspect herself in the mirror, adjusting her crown or smoothing the folds of her gown. She understood the power of her image and trusted the wardrobe to maintain that image with precision. The Queen's relationship with her wardrobe staff was one of mutual respect, yet it was shaped by the quiet tension of maintaining perfection. The Queen demanded nothing less than excellence, and the workers, though often unseen, were the ones who made it all possible. There was a rhythm to the daily preparation of the Queen's attire, an unspoken understanding between the Queen and the wardrobe staff. The workers knew exactly what was expected of them, and the Queen knew the worth of their labour. Theirs was a relationship built on silent collaboration, each person in their place, each aware of their role in creating the image of the monarch that the world would see. As we reflect on the role of the wardrobe, we realise that it was a position rooted in the very fabric of royal life. Yet, its significance has been largely forgotten, hidden in the shadows of history. The work of the wardrobe was constant, detailed and necessary, but it was performed out of sight, away from the grandeur and spectacle of the court. In the quiet labour of those who worked in the wardrobe, there was an understanding that their contribution was essential to the monarchy's image. And while their names were never etched into the history books, their efforts shaped the visual legacy of one of England's most famous queens. Their story, though muted by time, reminds us that history is often made not in the grand gestures, but in the silent, steady hands that create and maintain the images that define an era. In the quiet stillness of the royal court, clothing was not merely a matter of appearance, but a matter of state. Queen Elizabeth I, like many monarchs before her, understood the power of her image. Each day, her attire spoke volumes. Her garments were more than fabric. They were symbols of authority, of grace, of the untouchable sovereignty she carried. Yet, behind the shimmering fabrics and towering collars, there lay a laborious task of creation that few ever considered. The clothing of Queen Elizabeth was as intricate as it was grand. The gowns were made from the finest silks, velvets, and brocades, often woven with gold and silver thread. These garments were designed to reflect the glory of her reign, to shine as brightly as her crown itself. The colours she wore were chosen not just for their beauty, but for their symbolism. Deep reds, rich purples, and royal blues, all carefully selected to convey power and majesty. Each gown was meant to stand out, to elevate her presence above all others. The attire was never a simple thing. It was a complex blend of layers, each garment serving a purpose. Over time, the Queen's wardrobe evolved, with changes in fashion influencing how her clothing was designed and constructed. Ruffs, stiff collars, and puffed sleeves all had their place, but each required careful planning and fitting to ensure they would fit perfectly, both in terms of style and functionality. As we consider the beauty and elegance of Elizabeth's clothing, we might forget the physical weight that came with it. Each gown, though rich in fabric and ornamentation, was heavy. The garments were not made to be worn casually, nor were they designed with comfort in mind. Every piece was intended to impress, to make a statement about the Queen's unyielding authority. And yet, this very grandeur came with a physical burden. The gowns were often made up of multiple layers, corsets, skirts, petticoats, all weighing down upon the Queen's frame. The layers of fabric could be cumbersome, especially with the tight lacing of the corset, which was meant to shape the body in a way that emphasized the Queen's regal posture. The heaviness of her clothing, though a testament to her wealth and status, was not something that would have gone unnoticed by those who dressed her. Those responsible for her wardrobe were keenly aware of this weight. Every day they would prepare the Queen's attire, ensuring that each layer was added with care. The process was slow, deliberate, and repetitive. The Queen would stand, or sometimes sit, as the workers meticulously adjusted her garments, ensuring that everything was positioned just so. The lacing of her corset, for instance, could take several minutes to tighten properly, as it needed to create the desired effect of a slender waist and elevated bust. And once the dress was on, the weight of it all would settle on her shoulders, making movement less fluid, but never detracting from the image she projected. As with all things royal, perfection was expected. But perfection, as anyone who has ever worked with intricate fabrics knows, is not easily maintained. The Queen's clothing required constant attention, not only to ensure it remained pristine, but also to accommodate the demands of time and use. The garments were often worn repeatedly, sometimes even for multiple public appearances, and with each wearing there was the inevitability of wear and tear. For the staff of the wardrobe, this was an endless task. Each gown, each piece of clothing had to be carefully repaired, adjusted, and altered. The intricate embroidery, the elaborate beading, and the delicate lace all needed to be checked and fixed regularly. The Queen's clothing was not just made for one occasion, but for many, and it was expected to maintain its grandeur each time it was worn. The workers of the wardrobe were constantly occupied with the delicate work of repairs. Their days were filled with the soft sounds of needle against fabric, the quiet hum of their focused labour. These alterations were not done in haste. Each stitch was made with care, ensuring that the clothing could be worn again without showing the signs of time. They worked in silence, with little recognition, their only reward being the knowledge that their efforts were essential to the Queen's appearance. Behind the creation and maintenance of the Queen's attire stood the quiet workers who made it all possible. The wardrobe staff, though often hidden from the public eye, played a crucial role in shaping the Queen's public persona. Without them, the elaborate gowns and rich fabrics would have been nothing more than fine materials. It was their careful hands, their skill, and their diligence that transformed these materials into something that would reflect the power and elegance of the monarch. Every day, the workers would prepare for the Queen's appearance, choosing which garments to present and ensuring that everything was in order. The head of the wardrobe, often one of the most trusted members of the Queen's staff, would oversee the process, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. There were seamstresses, tailors, and attendants, each playing their part in ensuring that the Queen's attire was perfect for every occasion. Their work was not seen by the public, and yet it was essential to the monarchy. The clothing they created, the garments they maintained, were not just pieces of fabric, but parts of a larger performance. The Queen's clothing was a carefully constructed illusion designed to project power, authority, and grace. And behind this illusion was the quiet, steady work of the wardrobe staff, whose hands shaped the image of one of England's most enduring monarchs. As we reflect on the Queen's clothing, we are reminded of the delicate balance between beauty and burden. The garments were designed to present a vision of perfection, to create an image of regal grace and power. Yet, beneath the layers of fabric, there was the weight of responsibility, both for the Queen and for those who worked tirelessly to maintain this image. The task of dressing Queen Elizabeth was not a simple one. It was a demanding, never-ending process that required constant attention, adjustment, and care. The clothing, though beautiful, was heavy, both physically and symbolically, and behind every intricate gown, every carefully placed jewel, there was the quiet labour of the wardrobe staff, whose efforts, though unseen, were essential to the grandeur of the royal court. In the stillness of their work, there is a reminder that history is often shaped not by the grand gestures, but by the quiet, steady hands that support them. The Queen's clothing, in all its opulence, was a reflection of the labour that went into its creation, a labour that, like the garments themselves, was woven into the fabric of Elizabethan rule. Within the quiet chambers of the Tudor court, the wardrobe staff were aware of an unspoken truth. The Queen's image must be flawless at all times. Queen Elizabeth I was a monarch whose very presence commanded attention. She understood that her attire played a vital role in the perception of her power. Each gown, each delicate lace, each carefully placed jewel was not just for beauty, but for creating an image of unyielding authority. The wardrobe staff, entrusted with the responsibility of dressing her, felt the weight of this expectation deeply. The pressure to maintain this perfection was a constant undercurrent in the daily lives of those in the wardrobe. There was little room for error. Each morning, as the staff began their work, they were not simply choosing fabrics or arranging gowns. They were ensuring that every detail, no matter how small, aligned with the grandeur of the Queen's public image. This task was not only one of skill, but also of mindfulness. To stray from the delicate balance of power and grace the Queen's attire projected was to risk damaging the very persona she had so carefully constructed. Queen Elizabeth I's public appearances were an essential part of her reign, and her clothing was a vital element in these moments. The wardrobe had to strike a careful balance between maintaining the Queen's image of power and creating clothing that was practical for her daily life. While the gowns and dresses were crafted to project strength and grace, they also needed to allow the Queen to move, speak, and perform her royal duties with some ease. The intricate layers of fabric, the tightly laced corsets, the towering collars. Each item had to be positioned just right, not only for effect but for comfort as well. The act of dressing the Queen, then, was an act of balance. The workers of the wardrobe had to ensure that every garment was visually flawless, but also practical enough to allow her to carry out her duties. This delicate balance was at the heart of their work. While the Queen's clothing was meant to be regal and imposing, it could not hinder her ability to move or act. There was a quiet, constant pressure on the wardrobe staff to maintain this equilibrium. The complexity of their task was not simply in creating beautiful clothing, but in understanding the importance of subtlety, ensuring that the clothing spoke loudly without physically hindering the Queen's movements. The demand for perfection in Elizabeth's wardrobe extended beyond her public appearances. It was a constant requirement that her clothing be in flawless condition, ready for any occasion. The same outfit might be worn multiple times in a single week, yet it must look as though it were freshly made, untouched by the passage of time. For the wardrobe staff, this meant that the repairs, alterations, and constant maintenance of these garments were endless. The Queen's wardrobe was vast, yet it required an ever-present level of care. No matter how many dresses, gowns, and accessories were available, they were expected to be kept in pristine condition. A minor tear in a sleeve or a loose seam could not go unnoticed. Each day, as the staff began their work, they would inspect every garment with the same care, ensuring that every fold, every stitch was as perfect as it had been on the first day it was made. The pressure to maintain this level of perfection was relentless. The clothing had to withstand the tests of time and wear, but it could never show signs of that wear. The staff worked quietly, their hands moving with precision, ensuring that the Queen's image remained unbroken. This cycle of constant care and repair was an unspoken part of the work in the wardrobe, a routine that, while essential, went unnoticed by the world. The workers behind Queen Elizabeth's royal attire, though unseen by the public, were intimately aware of the importance of their labour. They understood that every adjustment, every stitch, was part of a larger narrative, a story of power and authority. And yet, they were seldom acknowledged. In the silence of their work, they knew that their efforts were central to the Queen's image, but they remained in the background, their names never spoken, their faces never captured. This silence was perhaps the greatest pressure of all, the knowledge that their labour, no matter how crucial, would never be seen by the public. The Queen's clothing, though a collaborative effort, was always presented as an extension of her own power, as if it had appeared effortlessly, as if the clothing had always existed in its perfect form. For the wardrobe staff, there was no recognition beyond their quiet satisfaction in knowing that their work allowed the Queen to project an image of unmatched elegance. And so, they worked, day after day, with the knowledge that their contribution to the Queen's image would remain largely invisible. They were aware of the delicate nature of their task, of the weight of perfection that rested on their shoulders. Yet, in the stillness of their labour, they fulfilled their duty, creating clothing that would live on as a silent testament to their skill and dedication. As we reflect on the work of the wardrobe staff, we are reminded of the delicate balance that must be maintained in the life of a monarch. Queen Elizabeth's clothing was more than just fabric. It was a constant reminder of her power, a visual declaration of her authority, and yet this image of perfection was not easily achieved. Behind every gown, every corset, every embroidered sleeve, there were the quiet hands of the workers who ensured that the Queen's image remained flawless. The pressure placed on the wardrobe staff was not one of loud demands or public scrutiny, but of silent, unyielding expectations. They were tasked with maintaining an image of perfection that would be seen by the world, but never by them. In the stillness of their work, they understood the weight of their responsibility, and though their efforts were unseen, they were integral to the narrative of the Queen's reign. Through their quiet labour, they helped create the lasting image of a monarch whose clothing, like her reign, was meant to withstand the test of time. Behind the grandiosity of Queen Elizabeth I's court, where festivities and ceremonies captured the public eye, there was a quieter, lesser-known world. This was the world of the wardrobe, a place where garments were crafted, repaired, and maintained, but rarely seen by the outside world. The workers in this space did not stand at the forefront of royal life. They were not celebrated with the same grandeur as the Queen, nor did they seek such recognition. Their role, though essential, was often overlooked. The quiet rooms of the wardrobe were filled with the soft sounds of sewing needles stitching fabric, the rustling of silk, and the hum of focused workers. Yet, despite the importance of their work, the staff remained hidden from public view. They worked diligently, ensuring that the Queen's attire was impeccable, yet their contributions were largely invisible to the world beyond the palace walls. It was a labour of love, performed in silence, where their expertise would only ever be acknowledged through the perfection of the garments they created. Every day, the workers in the wardrobe would gather to begin their tasks. There was no grand ceremony, no applause for their work. Instead, there was only the quiet repetition of their duties, the steady rhythm of hands at work, and the soft murmur of conversation as they went about their tasks. They were unseen, yet their work was central to the Queen's public image. And this subtle contradiction, the importance of their labor coupled with the invisibility of their roles, was one of the most defining aspects of their lives. To most observers, the Queen's magnificence appeared effortlessly displayed. Her gowns were always perfect, her crown always glittering, and her posture regal. Yet, behind this image, there was a constant, quiet effort to maintain this perfection. The workers in the wardrobe understood that their tasks were not merely about creating beautiful clothing, but about constructing the image of royalty that would be seen by the world. But despite this central role, the labor of the wardrobe staff was never made public. Their names were not recorded in the annals of history, their faces not captured in portraits. They were invisible crafters of the Queen's image. The gowns they created would be worn in front of ambassadors, nobles, and foreign dignitaries, but their efforts would never be acknowledged in the public ceremonies. The Queen's splendid appearance, though a direct result of their work, became a symbol of her personal grandeur and power, never hinting at the invisible hands that brought it to life. This invisibility was not only a matter of history, but of day-to-day life. The workers in the wardrobe did not seek recognition or fame. Their role was to serve quietly, without fanfare. Theirs was not a task to be celebrated in a public forum, but one to be performed with quiet dedication and attention to detail. And while this may have meant they were unseen by the public, it also meant they were never burdened with the weight of scrutiny. Their work was appreciated, perhaps in subtle ways, but never in a way that might disturb the calm order of the royal court. The role of the wardrobe staff in shaping the legacy of Queen Elizabeth I was a deeply silent one. While she was immortalized in portraits, her face etched into the minds of many, the workers who ensured her attire was fit for these occasions remained nameless. Their efforts were integral to the image that would be passed down through history, but it was the Queen herself who reaped the public acclaim. Each time the Queen walked into a room, each time she took her place among her court, she did so in garments that spoke of power, grace, and unyielding strength, and yet the making of these garments was a subtle, quiet affair. The creation of each gown, the adjustments to each sleeve, the careful positioning of each jewel, these were the things that allowed her to present herself as a figure of monumental stature. Yet, these behind-the-scenes efforts were never seen by those who witnessed her. For the workers in the wardrobe, their labor was an unseen thread in the tapestry of Elizabeth's reign. They crafted garments not just for daily wear, but for public appearances that would define her legacy. The Queen's royal image was their creation, but it was always attributed to her alone. The result of their work would endure through time, captured in paintings and stories, but the workers themselves would fade into history's shadows. They were invisible in the grand narrative, but their contribution was undeniable. Without their careful attention to detail, without their dedication to perfection, the Queen's regal presence would not have been possible. The invisible nature of the wardrobe staff's work was not unique to their role alone. It was a quiet truth that ran through much of the court's daily life. The servants, the seamstresses, the tailors, each person who worked behind the scenes played a critical part in ensuring the smooth functioning of the royal household, yet their work was rarely acknowledged. They were the silent creators of the royal experience, shaping the environment in which the Queen could reign. The workers in the wardrobe were a part of this invisible world. They worked not for personal glory or recognition, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing they had contributed to something greater. They were not looking for the public's eye, nor were they interested in standing in the spotlight. Their fulfillment came from the knowledge that their labor was essential, even if it would never be acknowledged in a way that could be seen or recorded. And so, each day, they carried out their work, quiet, repetitive, and unnoticed. There were no grand gestures of gratitude, no formal recognition. Yet, in the soft rhythm of their labor, they played a pivotal role in creating the image of a queen that would last for generations. They were invisible, yet essential, shaping history in a way that would never be fully acknowledged by the world. As we reflect on the invisible nature of the wardrobe staff's work, we are reminded that history often hides in the quietest of corners. It is in the unseen actions, the unnoticed labour, that much of history's true work is done. The Queen's public image, her regal presence, was not the result of one person, but of the countless, quiet workers who shaped it with their steady hands and dedicated hearts. In this quiet work, we find the true nature of service, not in grand gestures, but in the silent, steady effort to create something larger than oneself. The workers of the wardrobe were part of this effort, invisible to the world but essential to the lasting legacy of Queen Elizabeth I. Their work may never have been seen, but it remains embedded in the very fabric of history. Though the wardrobe workers of Queen Elizabeth I's court were largely unseen, their legacy is quietly woven into the fabric of history. The delicate, intricate garments they created were not merely clothing, but were representations of the monarchy's image, symbols of authority, power, and grace. While their names were not recorded, their craft was evident in the elegance and splendour of the Queen's appearance, which would be immortalised in portraits and public events. The legacy of the wardrobe is not found in the pages of history books, but in the timeless image of a queen whose attire spoke volumes about her reign. As time passes, much of the wardrobe's labour has faded from the forefront of historical memory. The workers, who spent their days in quiet devotion to their craft, did not seek fame or recognition. Their work was always in the background, but the fruits of their labour were central to the Queen's lasting legacy. The gowns, the jewels, the intricate embroidery, they became part of the story of Elizabeth I, living on in the minds of those who studied her reign. The absence of recognition did not diminish their contribution, it only highlighted the subtle yet essential nature of their work. The workers of the wardrobe may have never been celebrated, but their influence remains inextricably linked to the portrayal of Queen Elizabeth I. In every portrait, in every description of her royal attire, there is an echo of the quiet labour that sustained her public image. The legacy of their work, though invisible, continues to shape how we remember the Queen. Through their steady, meticulous care, they ensured that history would view Elizabeth not only as a powerful monarch, but as a symbol of grace and dignity, carefully crafted by hands that worked in silence. In reflecting upon the legacy of the wardrobe workers, we see that history is often shaped not by those in the spotlight, but by those who work in the shadows. Their quiet dedication allowed the grandeur of the monarchy to endure, not through loud declarations, but through the steady, unnoticed work that underpinned it. The wardrobe's legacy is a gentle reminder that even the most invisible contributions can leave an indelible mark on the fabric of time. Thank you for joining us. Rest well, take care of your beautiful self, whatever that means to you, and until next time, good night.